Hi, it's Karolyn. I'm here to help you learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this two-dimensional football topper using my trace, cut, and smooth method. Now, I was originally going to do this in 3D and it was a nightmare, so I'm going to show you a little bit of footage of me trying to get this football three-dimensional, and this is why I make two-dimensional objects or fondant decorations, because sometimes I suck at 3D. So let's get started. So I made this Rice Krispie ball and it was just not setting up really hard. I was able to kind of get it into a football shape, and then I covered it with some fondant, and by the time I finished it, it looks like an almond or like a Reese's peanut butter egg. It was just flat on the bottom. It wasn't pointy on the sides. I hated it, so I started over. I have a piece of non-slip pad underneath my cutting board so it doesn't slide around, a wet paper towel with an X-Acto knife, and a Dresden tool, and I have gum tex powder, CMC powder, Tylose powder. It's all the same thing. It's mixed into my fondant. You want to knead it in there, roll it out, let it sit, and it's going to help the fondant set hard, and it's going to be so much easier to work with. You don't want your fondant dragging when you're cutting it. I printed this out the size that I wanted it to be, and I rolled that fondant out about a 1/2 inch thick, and then I want to put some texture in it. So I have this little screen here, and it was never used for anything but cakes, and I am just rolling that rolling pin on top of it to transfer the texture to the fondant. Now I'm using my trace, cut, and smooth method, so I put that picture on top of the fondant, and I'm tracing the outline of the football. And then after I trace the outer part, I trace that line going through the center, and I want to trace the stitching details and also where all of the laces are going. And peel that back. And since this is a thicker piece of fondant, I want to make a guideline cut first. So I'm just sticking the tip of my knife into the fondant. And then once I have that guideline, I'm sticking the knife all the way down to the cutting board and cutting it out. This way I don't mess up the fondant. And then I want to flip it upside down, take my fingers and smooth out the edges. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing from the front. So you always want to smooth your cuts anytime you cut anything out of fondant to make it look nice and pretty. Now I'm taking my Dresden tool and just deepening those lines. And I want to take a stitching wheel and create this stitching pattern. And once again, just taking my Dresden tool and deepening that center line. Now I've rolled out this white fondant really thin. I have my ribbon cutter. I want to make sure that I have it the right size, and I'm cutting these little strips on a curve because it has to wrap around the football. Take my fingers and just smooth out those edges. Then I'm going to flip it upside down and get a little bit of water on the back, and I'm looking at the picture and making sure that I'm putting this in the right spot. And you see how it's kind of curved? So that's why I cut the strips in a little curved shape, and I'm pressing it down, and then I'm going to flip it over. And I was going to wrap them around the entire way, but I thought it didn't meet right. It looks stupid, so I'm just cutting it at the edges. So just cut it with my X-Acto knife and press it down and flip it back over, and I'm using my Dresden tool just to create that line in the white. And now I want to make the little laces. So I have that strip cutter and that thin white piece of fondant, and I'm pressing it into the cutter, then using my Dresden tool to press it through. It's just easier to do it this way than to push it down against the countertop. Then I smack it on the countertop and they all come out. Now, they do make a strip cutter that has thinner strips. I just don't have one. So I have to carefully cut these into 2 pieces, and I just did that twice just to make sure that I had the same size, the same width strips. This will make sense as I go. And now I'm putting the wider strip on top of the picture just to make sure that I'm cutting these individual laces long enough. And again, they are too wide. I don't have that thinner strip cutter, so I'm just cutting about 1/3 of the strip off, and I'm saving that wider part. And I'm doing that 8 times. And now I'm cutting these to size, so I put those 2 long thin strips that I cut before on top of the picture and make sure they're the right size. And then I want to squeeze each end into a point so I can tuck them into the fondant. You will see what that means as I do it. And I'm going to get a little bit of water on the back of each one. And I'm putting one just above that center line. and I'll put another one right below it. Using my fingers to get it in the right spot. And then I have this tiny ball tool. I will link this in the description, and I'm tucking those ends down into the fondant. And then I want to use my spatula to make sure they are perfectly straight. And now I'm doing the same thing for the laces. I put it on top of the picture, cut it to make sure it's the right size, and I'm squeezing each end to a point. And I'm doing that 8 times. And then I'm going to get a little bit of water behind each one and stick it down. So I'm starting on one end, then going to the other end. Do you see how I have the picture close so I can make sure I'm getting them in the right spot? And I'm doing left, right, left, right. So I ended up just putting them on top to make sure I have them in the right spot before I glue them down with the water. Now I'm taking the ball end of that tool and just creating little holes. Do you see how I'm lifting up the fondant and putting the hole down? And then I'm tucking each one down into the hole. And now I want to screw in 2 skewers in the bottom so they can stick into the cake and it can stand upright. So I want to screw them in there. I'm not jabbing it in there, and I'm doing 2 next to each other. That way it doesn't twist when it's in the top of the cake. And I want to make sure it's not poking out the front or the back, and I'm going to realign it on the picture and let it dry for about 48 hours. So there you go. It is a pretty simple process once you get the trace, cut, and smooth technique down. It's very important that you get your fondant to the correct consistency, because I'm telling you, it's a nightmare if your fondant is too soft. And this football, I actually made it again. The first time I made it, the fondant was way too soft. It kept dragging when I cut it. So I needed some more of that gum tex powder in it, rolled it out, let it sit, and it was so much easier to work with. So I did start filming footage. I was going to film this entire cake, but it just ended up taking me so long to make, and I was getting so annoyed. So I stopped filming. But I do have a little bit of footage showing you how I covered the cake board. I used a foam core cake board, and I cut it to a 16 by 16 so it would fit in a 16-inch box. And I covered it with marshmallow fondant. And then I used that same trace, cut, and smooth method to cut out the Roman Catholic lettering. And I put that as the end zone on the football field for the cake board. So here is the final cake. I am so sorry that I couldn't film the entire thing, but the top tier is 5 inches, the middle tier is 7, and the bottom tier is 9. And it feeds about like 60 people or so. So I think that's it. If you have any questions or comments about this, leave it below. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you are enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is in the description. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you can check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next, and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake, have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.